to the stage. We've got Kevin O'Toole, Chief Strategy Officer for Cirium. We've got Stephanie Weir, VP of Aviation Development from Virgin Atlantic. And we've got Luke Goggin. Sorry? Oh, from apologies. From Gatwick. And we've got Luke Goggin, who is the VP of Global Sales at Virgin Atlantic. So to start the session, Kevin's going to run through some slides. He's going to set the scene. The session today is about a reflection on the past, the present, and the future of the aviation sector. Take it away, Kevin.
Thank you very much. So thank you. I'm Kevin O'Toole. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Cirium. I think I can say now who I am, because we were going to go through the panel, but I'll tell you now. So I was a journalist for many years, but I am in recovery. For the last 15, I haven't written anything. Cirium started life back in over 100 years ago as Flight magazine, and we've worked very hard over the last 15 years to become a data and analytics company. We're now probably the largest in the airline world. So we bring together fleets, flight data, schedule, and traffic and fares into a single database and serve the whole of the airline, airport, aerospace, aircraft finance, and travel business. So I've taken just a little piece of that data to run through where we are in the cycle and what may come next. So we all know about the airline cycle, which we've been in for ever since I've been here. The last 500 years that I've been in aviation, this has been happening. And I've started with the bust, because that's what we've just had. Next, during that bust, we have capacity constrained, demand is recovering, and so we get to a recovery. And that allows the profits to rise, the yields recover, and we get onto a boom. But at the height of the boom, what all the airlines have traditionally done is to order a lot more capacity to come into the market. The profitability starts to wobble, especially if there's an input price like fuel that goes up strongly. And the industry is poised, ready for a trigger point to come along and send us back into a bust. And that cycle, as I say, ever since I've been in aviation, which is a very long time, has gone on. And the question now is whether it's going to be different. So I have when I was the editor of Airline Business, I wrote an article about the laws of airline dynamics. And the first law of airline dynamics is that every action on capacity has an equal, seating capacity has an equal and opposite reaction on yield. So the more seats that flow into the market, the more that grows, and the underlying demand doesn't grow, then yield falls. And the question is, this time, will the industry be different? Will this time be different? And there's three reasons. I'm a big skeptic, by the way, that things change, because there's some fundamental, we can discuss it on the panel, there's some fundamental things that remain the same, but there are three things at least about this recession, this massive collapse really of aviation, which is different. The first is that this bust has been deeper and longer than any in aviation history. And we're not just talking about going back to 9/11 or possibly to the first Gulf War, we're talking about ever. And I've taken this data from ICAO. You can see the purple lines down there, they represent the Second World War, and aviation actually grew during the Second World War, bizarrely. The oil crisis at either end of the 1970s, again, a little bit of a bump, but it still grew, traffic grew. Then we had the first Gulf War and the recession that followed. That was the first time that aviation edged down for a year, but only 1% or so. Then followed by 9/11, which was really seen at that time as a catastrophe. But just to put it in context, that was a 3% decline in 1 year, followed by a couple of years to get back. It was slightly deeper in the States, but that's what it was. It felt at the time as though it was something really, really profound, but look what happened next. We had the financial crisis in 2008, a lot of airlines went bust, but then this happened. An absolutely astonishing decline. At the lowest point, passenger traffic was something like 90% down on the year before. So it's been deeper and it's also been longer. This is now 4 years and we're only just getting back. So if we look at global passenger numbers, which are coming from our DOFM model, you can see that they just now, over the summer, this goes up to August, I just capped it at the end of the summer for August 2024, it's just hit a new peak compared with 2019. It very nearly hit in 2023, but didn't quite. We're back. But this is interesting. The number of flights is still slightly below the number of flights back in 2019. That's that yellow dotted line across the top. And that means, due to the first law of airline dynamics, that revenues have grown. And so the airline industry as a whole is in a pretty good position just now. But you can just see, I don't know if you can see, but just at the very top of that line, it's beginning to flatten. And that's what the worry is. Some of the restraint on capacity has not been because the airlines have necessarily wanted it to happen. It's come because of production problems, MAX 8 problems at Boeing, the GTF fan causing a lot of A320neos to be taken out of the market for a while, at least for maintenance, and also just difficulty ramping up again after the decline. But you can see where we stand. The second factor is the recovery has been very uneven. All recoveries are uneven, but this one more than most. And if we look, these are the three markets that I looked at throughout COVID. The reason for them is they're all about the same size and they're in different regions of the world. So you have the US domestic market. Remember at that time, by the way, that intracontinental was just finished for the period of 2020-21. So I was looking at the US domestic market about propensity to fly, and that's why they're passenger numbers, not RPKs. You can see that it already came back in 23, really nearly came back in 2022. And it's been going well since. There's a little bit of softening in fares, yields, but on the whole, it is very solid. In Europe, could have almost come back in 22, but there was a lot of difficulty getting the aircraft back in the air because of personnel not being around, not there to support it. But you can see on the green, it's a very, very humpy curve because of all the holidays we take in Europe. It's just come back now this summer, and 2023 was very nearly back at the peak, but for the full year it was slightly down, and now it will be up almost certainly for 24, so that recovery's in place. The final one is Asia, and this is not the whole of Asia Pacific. I've taken out China, and I've taken out South India in the stands because they have their own gravity, and of course there were issues with China. So this is the flying around really East Asia, excluding China. And you can see even with that exclusion, it has not yet recovered. And remember that in the past, Asia Pacific was very much the engine of growth for the airline industry. That back in the day, in the 2000s, when the rest of the world was flailing, suddenly SARS hit Hong Kong. By the end of, or China and Hong Kong, by the end of that year, the region was back in growth, even though it had virtually stopped flying for about a month. Because of the huge amount of growth that was taking place, that is no longer the case. The other uneven nature, which I'm sure as travel professionals that you're well aware of, is that this recovery has been led by the economy cabin. The business class cabins are still very much down globally. That doesn't mean they're down for every airline everywhere, but they are down overall, and the capacity has been taken out. So, because there's less capacity, the actual fares have nearly doubled at the peak in the summer. And the overall has been about 20% growth in revenues, which is good news, good profitable news. Although it has to be set aside that the dollar devaluation during that period is also about 20%, so it's more or less the same sort of revenues as back in the day. And if you look down in the gold colour, I had a look at the global distribution systems, Amadeus and Sabre in particular, to see how they were doing. In the first half of the year, they're still down 25% in terms of the bookings. It's kind of interesting that the bookings in the corporate travel tools are less than the decline in business class. So I think, like me, people are having to travel slightly further back in the plane. And there is one other reason why business travel is a big concern, which will not have escaped you, is that it's different this time because of sustainability. Sustainability has been with us for a long time. It has been a major issue for us to address. But I guess up until the COP meetings really began to take off during COVID, it hadn't been an issue that had really affected the underlying economics or trajectory of the airline industry. Now it does. If you look at the line on the red line, that is the total amount of CO2. We have, sorry, I should mention this. We have put all of our data together, the aircraft tracking data, the positioning data, the aircraft equipment data, and the loads, together with a fuel model to create a fuel curve, which we've now used in sustainability. In fact, the only hard part of sustainability is that 1 kilo of fuel represents about 3.1 something kilos of CO2. So you can just see we're slightly still below the peak back in July 2019, which is when it was hit, but we are very close to coming back, and that's quite frightening for, especially for the corporates who now have to report it across the whole of Europe. For example, they have to scope 3 reporting has come in, so next year all corporations will have to report it, and they have to also show reduction and mitigation, or they should show a reduction and mitigation. And that's tough because globally, big global corporations have about maybe 25% of their emissions, including scope 3, come from air travel and related. And for some of the big banks and maybe the consultancies, that can go up to 35 and even 50%. So it's a very big issue and it is constraining. The one piece of good news is the green line. That green line represents the amount of CO2 burnt per revenue passenger kilometre. In other words, it's, if you like, it's a measure of efficiency and how much fuel we burn for carrying a passenger or a kilometre. That has gone down by about 6%, partly because the older aircraft have been grounded and the aircraft are also fuller, and operations have been much more on time than they were before the recession. So, the question is, could the cycle be different? And the answer is maybe. I'm not yet convinced, but it could. We certainly all have to work together. I think there's been too much, in the past at least, of grandstanding and table thumping from some of the airlines and international forums, where they are criticising airports, they're criticising the travel trade, they're criticising manufacturers. It does need to be the whole of the village raising this child. It has to be done together. Airlines on their own cannot create, cannot mend sustainability. They can't mend the cycle. It has to be done together with the airports, the air navigation service providers, with aerospace, finance companies, and of course with travel. So what should we do? If we can all work together, we learned a lot of lessons about efficiency and flexibility during COVID. Choices were being made very, very late in the day about what flew and how it flew. Making better use of the aircraft capacity and the ground capacity that we have, rather than adding new. That means having fuller aircraft, probably with more seats in it. If you really want to cut, that's the best thing you could do. In fact, to cut CO2 emissions. Fewer delays, of course, and operational excellence. Plus, those offers that are there, and we're talking about sales and presentation to customers, those sales should be much more closely, and I think that the technology is coming through and the processes are coming through to make this true, to get much closer to the underlying demand in the market and have a bit more of a balanced view of the market rather than just push capacity on and hope that it gets filled up. And on a personal note, I hope that all of this can be achieved with a better understanding of the data. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much. Fascinating lay of the land, and I think it really sets the scene for what we're about to discuss. So I'll start with Stephanie. Gatwick Airport, not Atlanta, have got some very big ambitions. You want to be net zero by 2030. You've also got some huge projects underway. Can you tell us, how can you hit that target whilst developing a new runway? What are you doing at the moment? We've got just over 5 years to go. Is it achievable?
It is achievable. So, hi everyone. Thank you for coming. Gatwick has made a pledge to be net zero by 2030, and we actually believe so much in sustainability that we moved that up by 10 years. Our original goal was 2040. And it's not just a pledge. We have put a massive and very ambitious CapEx plan behind this. We are investing £250 million to make this a reality. We're well on our way. So the scope 1 and 2 emissions that are under the direct control of the airport, those are mostly the fleet that we have at the airport. You would be surprised about the amount of vehicles that it takes to keep an airport of our size running. And at the moment, we have over 300 diesel vehicles on airport. We have fully transitioned all of those to HVO, and we are replacing them with electric vehicles as they reach the end of their life cycle. The other thing we're doing is replacing all of our boilers at the airport that produce all of the hot water and heat that we have. Those are the two really big things. Both of those projects, like I said, the fleet renewal has already been done and the boilers are well on their way. We are investing in creating renewable energy on airport, and all of the electricity that we do purchase is renewable. We are the first international airport to have an electric forecourt charging. So if you're an employee, you're a passenger, you're a local resident, you can come to the airport and charge your vehicle quite quickly and enjoy a nice cup of coffee while you're doing it. And like I said, those are all huge steps. It isn't just a pledge. It's things that are in place today that are making us more sustainable by the day. So yes, we absolutely will hit our targets by 2030.
That's awesome. Where do you think the easy wins are on sustainability? And what I mean by this is, where can you, if you're consulting with other airports, what can they do that's easy to implement and easy to roll out? Maybe there's some of the ones that you just listed, but...
Well, I'm not sure anything we would call easy.
Okay.
But yes, there are things that are low-hanging fruit, right? If there's anything diesel on your airport, get rid of it or find another way to fuel it. Invest in sustainable energies. Think about working with your local communities as well. Sustainability is not just about the environment, right? It's how you are contributing to your local economy. It's what you are doing for residents. It's so much more than the environment. So think about how you are interacting with the community and how you can make the community around you better. We actually have 4 different programs within our sustainability program and our Decade of Change. And it's really about, how do we make the surrounding area better? How can we drive local economy? How can we create jobs? How can we make the right decisions for everyone around us?
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Luke, so let's talk about some customer trends. Sure. You guys have got some new routes for 2025 that are upcoming. What were you seeing? Why have you launched these new routes? Is there a massive drive? Are you seeing a lot of data that's focused on these areas? Are they big leisure markets, business markets for you? Why have you launched them?
There's a lot in that answer. Firstly, hello everyone. My name's Luke. I look after global sales at Virgin Atlantic. That's essentially everything that doesn't come to us through our .com or our holidays business. Anything that comes through indirect channels, so business travel and leisure travel. I think that it's quite a broad answer, and I think there's a number of factors we can hit on there. Particularly, I'm thinking about some of the things that Kevin cited. But we've got a group of people, as you would imagine. Van started up again. That's excellent. We've got absolutely. We've got a group of people back at our VHQ who literally spend all day, every day, going through the data, looking at the demands, trying to work out how we can optimise the fleet that we have, how we make fleet investments, and whether the aircraft can take us to. As it stands today, we're going to fly next summer to 29 destinations, 11 of which are in the areas you might imagine Virgin Atlantic, the clue's in the name, our US heartlands, but increasingly we're seeing opportunities to broaden beyond what you might see our sort of traditional network. And I guess there's a number of those coming up next year. Toronto, probably the best example is Riyadh, where we see a coming together of almost all of the demand factors. Huge business travel demand, huge premium demand for what was traditionally would have been maybe a non-premium market. You think about VFR, visiting friends and relatives. Actually, that VFR traffic coming in and out of Riyadh is premium. And the other thing I think is just if you think about customer trends and what people want and where they want to go, is I think I'm sure everyone in this room has heard it 100 times, but post-COVID, people are investing in experiences rather than things. And somewhere like Riyadh, and under the banner of the Saudi Arabia 2030, gives people the opportunity to try something completely new, an experience they've not had before. Hopefully delivered within a premium package and a premium wrapper by Virgin, an airline like Virgin Atlantic.
Yeah, really interesting, and fair play for concentrating throughout the.
I was trying to name the tune, but lost on me.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit here and talk about some things that impact every airline moving forwards, which is sustainable aviation fuel.
Yep.
SAF. So Luke, you were actually on Flight 100s.
Yes, it was.
Can you explain to the audience what this was, why it's important for the industry?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And I think I'd probably take a moment as well at the start just to echo Stephanie's words. Sustainability for us is clearly so much more than sustainable aviation fuel. We have a whole charter around our community work and how we treat our people and how we treat our supply chain, and I'd happily go through that anytime if anybody wants to go through it. But the two biggest levers we have as an airline, and most airlines have, is their fleet and fuel. Much like Gatwick, we're putting our money where our mouth is and we're investing in our fleet. Current average aircraft age is 6.8 years. I think that's one of the youngest fleets in the skies worldwide. I think it's definitely one of the youngest on the transatlantic. And clearly having a modern aircraft fleet allows you to be incredibly fuel efficient, which allows you to reduce your carbon burn. It also reduces your fuel bill as well, so there's kind of motivation for an airline there. For example, on New York today, right now, customers have a choice, and we know it's an important choice. I think 70% of the customers in the latest IATA data said that this was a material factor. I don't think it's the primary factor yet for deciding which aircraft to choose, which airline to choose. Right now today, our aircraft on London to New York is up to 35% more fuel efficient than our competitors. And that's not a Virgin Atlantic salesperson stat, that's Google flight stats, which people can go and check and reference. So if you think about it, it's an ongoing investment in the fleet, which creates a more modern, lower carbon burn aircraft, also delivers a better customer experience for our customers in more modern aircraft and modern services. The next big and most viable lever that we have is sustainable aviation fuel. So Flight 100, for those of you who are not familiar with it, it was almost a year ago, I think it was the 28th of November last year. We flew the first ever transatlantic flight from London to New York, JFK, on 100% SAF. Again, picking up some of Kevin's point, this wasn't a Virgin Atlantic thing. This was us, it was the UK government, it was the fuel companies, the engine companies, the airport infrastructure. And the point of that wasn't to say, aren't we great, we flew the first 100% SAF flight from London to New York. The point of it was to prove that it can be done with today's infrastructure. And yes, it was a lot of effort, and yes, it took a lot of time and investment, but actually when we landed that plane in JFK, the most amazing thing was that nothing was very amazing. It landed, we refueled it with jet fuel, and it flew home again. That was it. And I think by pushing that forward, and all of our data that we gathered on that flight has been shared with the entire airline community. It's not, again, Virgin Atlantic kind of sort of holding this for ourselves. All of the data is available on the fuel burn and the environmental impact. We're just trying to push the debate further forward, faster. We actually had the welcome event back in the Houses of Parliament. On Flight 100, we had many MPs of all persuasions. So there was a lot of attention and a lot of interest in it. So I think we've proved the point. The next phase now is building out the supply chain, and certainly you'll hear Virgin Atlantic say, and I'm sure other airlines saying that, we're leaning on the government, we're leaning on the oil majors to create the industry, to build the supply, to create the supply chain for us, because we have proved if it can be made, we can fly it. And I think that's just a really, really powerful statement.
Absolutely. And maybe this is a good time to loop in Stephanie from more the infrastructure side. There's no getting away from the fact that SAF is expensive right now. It's 6, 7, 8 times more expensive than jet fuel. What can the airports do to help incentivize airlines to utilize SAF?
Very jealous that I was on that flight. I would have killed to be on it, and you're right. It's not about the actual flight, it's about what it represented. The reason SAF is so expensive right now is because we're not producing it at scale. The biggest problem that we have right now is scale. We have got to produce this in an amount that is just not being produced now. And it doesn't count if it's in the United States, right? We need to produce it in our own country so that we can all access it. It's great that the US is doing it. It's a great model. The tax incentive scheme that they have in California is really impressive. It's something that our government should look at. But we have got to all work together to produce this at scale to lower the costs. Once we get it at scale, we'll all figure out how to pay for it, because it is the future of aviation. We all have to use it. Gatwick, from an infrastructure point of view, is ready for it. We did a flight as well that was run on 100% SAF fuel, a little bit shorter than yours, but it still counted. And a lot of our flights are going to Europe, so it's really important that we could prove that it can be done. Now we just make sure that we all have access to it and at the right amounts.
Absolutely. Kevin, you're less bullish on SAF.
I would love to
tee you up like that.
I would love to be more bullish on SAF.
Yes. Why is that?
Well, because in the net zero 2050, which is not that far away, and I applaud, by the way, absolutely applaud what you've done at Gatwick and also that first zero flight. It's not that far away, it's 26 years. I think last year we had a record use of SAF, and it was still only 1% or 2% in the whole of the industry. And we're not just talking about a very good airline making or a good airport making progress, we're talking about the whole industry making progress. To get to the 60% of the reduction which is required from use of SAF, as opposed to all the other mitigating circumstances, it's just mathematics today that you would have to have about 80% of your fuel using SAF, because 20% is also SAF is not entirely carbon free because it comes with production and shipping. So, to get there, we would have to have not 80% of today's fuel as SAF, but 80% of 25 years' time of fuel as SAF, and that is what worries me. We're a sister company. Actually, we're a sister company of Relics within Relics of Green Exhibitions as well. But there's a sister company which monitors production of energy and fuel, and it was just a passing remark from the person who does the refineries and also looks at SAF, and he said, "Yeah, if there was enough biofuel in the world today to fuel aviation, every last drop of it would be used to fuel lorries as biodiesel." And that is a worry. So we would be competing. We're not just competing for aviation, we're competing with the rest of the world who also wants this. And there isn't any way at the moment to see more than 10% of aviation fuel as it currently is as SAF, because that's what the production is going to be in the next 10 to 15 years. That could change, you're right. We have to really put pressure on government, but we have to put pressure on government globally. It isn't enough, and it's one of the things the airports could do actually, and are beginning to do, especially in Europe, is to start to penalise or to skew charges, so they penalise older and, as they did with noisier aircraft, they could penalise more fuel inefficient aircraft. But I do think still it comes down, there has to be between now and whenever we get to the golden period where we've got all of this SAF coming through, between now and then I think it behoves us all to really work hard at getting more efficient, at getting more people on those planes, getting more seats on the planes, and being much more efficient in terms of how we fly around. Because that you mentioned it actually, that and it's true by the way, we've checked the numbers, Virgin is the most efficient on the North Atlantic for sure, because of your fleet. You have a very modern fleet. That wasn't always the case, but it is now, and you've got a very modern fleet. If everyone had the same sort of 787, say 350s, it would make and they were new, it can make a 20-25% difference over others. That's the sort of thing you could do today while we wait for SAF. Reducing delays in taxi times, single engine taxiing, electric tow trucks, all of those things can happen now.
Could I just add, I think it's a really good point you made. You think about the infrastructure, airports, think about the airlines, pressure on the government, the oil companies, all of it coming together. There's a huge part in this that everybody in this room can play, which is demand. Think about ground source heat pumps in your house.
Yes.
They're more expensive, but we know that they're far more efficient. The more they're bought, the more demand there is, the more they get made, the lower the price will come. Think about the first Tesla, think about Teslas now, think about production of electric cars. If there is a groundswell of demand and people lean into and gravitate towards, and I'm not just talking about Virgin Atlantic, the most efficient hotels, the most efficient airlines, the most efficient airports, the market will respond accordingly. And I would encourage consumers to reward the organisations that are moving furthest and fastest in that direction.
Sure. In the interim, will that put prices up for the consumer, and will people be happy to pay?
I'd use the same analogy as the ground source heat pumps, the test. At some point, something kind of sort of needs to change. There is an investment that is required, and I think there are multiple stakeholders in that. But
one of two things will happen: either people will pay more, or airlines will lose money. It has to happen. I think it has to happen. We have to pay for the full cost of our travel, including the cost of the carbon. I think that has to happen. Maybe we had it easy for too long, I don't know. But I think it has to happen. But just to go back on your point about the SAF will be expensive unless it's produced in vast amounts. It will be a lot more expensive if indeed there's enough.
Sure, okay. Conscious of time, so we're going to rattle through some more questions, but we will have a very quick Q&A, so if you've got any questions, please put your hand up in a minute, not quite yet. You'll be the first one we come to today. I like that. So customer experience is the kind of last topic we need to talk about. Stephanie, the customer journey is often perceived to start probably when you book something, right? But physically when you're at the airport. What did Gatwick Airport do to try and improve the customer journey?
I'd actually say the customer journey starts the second you leave your house.
Yes.
Because it's part of the whole stress of the travel experience. And that's one of the huge advantages that Gatwick has, and it also links into our sustainability plans. So Gatwick is connected to 210 rail stations in the UK, and we are, I know, it's a huge number. And we have direct links to London Bridge and to Victoria. This is Zone 1, Centre London, in under 30 minutes. We are trying to get 60% of our consumers to travel by rail because it's really easy. So I do a lot of traveling for work. I'm on a plane constantly, so maybe not great for the environment, but it's part of the job. Last week I flew out of 4 airports. I flew out of Gatwick, I flew out of another London airport, and I flew out of 2 European.
Can you name
I'm not going to name any names. But I live in Victoria. From the second that I arrived in the train station at Gatwick to getting through security, it took me 6 minutes. And if anyone thinks that that's because I work there and I got special treatment, absolutely untrue. When I travel through Gatwick, I'm just like everyone else. And the reason that happens is because Gatwick is 100% focused on efficiency. We do everything we can to remove you waiting in a queue. 95% of our passengers get through security in under 5 minutes. I guarantee you, and this is data driven and you can look it up, that does not happen in any other UK airport. If you get to Gatwick, you are going to go straight through security. And we're investing in making our security even better. We are using technology to remove any barrier that causes any queues. So huge focus on biometrics, right? In the next couple of years, you'll be able to get to Gatwick and you will have a biometric bag drop, right? You won't have the kiosks, you won't have to talk to people. They'll look at your face, they'll know exactly where you're going, and your bag will go off. We will have biometric boarding. We will have personalized apps that tell you exactly what you want. We are going to have autonomous vehicles, so PRM is something we're really focused on, making sure that Gatwick is the airport for everyone, whatever your needs, whatever your journey. If you are a PRM passenger and you can have an autonomous wheelchair, do you know how much independence that is going to give you? How much more you're going to be able to enjoy being in the airport? We want you to enjoy being in Gatwick. We don't want you standing in long queues and getting frustrated. We want you to get in, get through, and enjoy being in our infrastructure and have a really happy, relaxed passenger when they get to the airline and really excited about the destination they're getting to. So it's all about innovative use of technology and removing barriers and being really, really efficient. And that's what Gatwick does better than anyone. We're the most efficient single runway in the world. There is no other place in the world where you can get 55 movements off of a single runway. Hopefully we'll have 2 runways soon, but at the moment we've only got, well, we do have 2, but we can't use them simultaneously. Hopefully that will change very soon, but at the moment, the processing and the efficiency is what makes the customer journey at Gatwick so special.
I have to admit, Gatwick is my airport of choice.
And mine. And I live much nearer to Heathrow.
So, yeah, we've got some fans here.
I didn't pay either of them to say that, by the way. We just met
Paid a little bit.
I'm hoping to get through security much quicker next time.
Luke, Virgin are, in my head anyway, perceived as probably one of the best airlines from a branding perspective when it comes to customer experience, customer feel. What do Virgin do differently other than some pretty fun marketing campaigns that actually makes you stand out and makes people want to book with you guys?
You're not alone in thinking that. Just last week we picked up Skytrax Award, Best European Airline, I think 3rd year in a row. I would echo a lot of the points that Stephanie talked about, investment in technology, investment in our CRM systems, because actually I think the customer journey is months, if not sometimes, almost a full year before when our customers are browsing, thinking about inspiration, where to go, how we're using artificial intelligence to serve them content that will inspire them and match the needs of those individual customers. And then once they start to come into the customer journey, like the physical customer journey, there is so much work going on across the piece, but if I could point at one thing, it would be our people, 100%. Amazing technology, we've got great new aeroplanes, we've got fantastic onboard products, awesome clubhouses. I think our clubhouse is about the only place in the world you actually quite want to be delayed sometimes. But really, it's the people. And this has been a Virgin Atlantic thing from day one. It's a Richard Branson mantra. Look after your people, they'll look after their customers. Our NPS scores are absolutely outstanding, and I have worked for other airlines and seen other NPS scores. It just is amazing to work with an organisation that puts as much effort into their people's happiness as they do sustainable profitability. It's just an absolute core part of business, and I firmly believe that is what delivers what we call the red thread that runs through our organisation, that allows us to stand out even when times are tough. And it's the airline industry, things happen, people get frustrated, stuff happens to you. If you have the right people looking after your customers, you can deliver that fantastic customer service.
You guys have been doing it for years, so fair play for the award as well. That's great. So we've got about 5 minutes just over. So should we open to Q&A? Happy to answer some questions. The more controversial, the better. We'll start with the guy who put his hand up very eagerly earlier on. Yep.
Hi, thank you. I'm Dallas from Discover Cars. About a month ago, I was at WTM in Amsterdam, and the boss of a major European airline started his talk saying that the airline industry is broken and it has been broken for 30 years. I don't know if it's just me, but I felt that throughout his presentation, he didn't really explain what he meant with that, right? So now I'm in front of you, three very smart people, and I wanted to ask you, what is your comment about that? Is the airline industry truly broken?
There's bits of it that definitely have been broken. Sorry, I want me to go. It seemed
I'm not one of the three experts.
It was pointed to me. I don't know how I felt. I just remember back in the day, I was interviewing the chief executive of KLM back in the day, Leo van Dijk, and he said he'd been talking to a journalist, and they'd been talking about how bad it was in the depths of a recession, and things were going on with strikes and everything else. And she said, well, why are so many people in the airline? Why are you in this if it's such a terrible business? And Leo van Dijk said, I didn't say that. She said, you did. You said how terrible it was. He said, oh no, it's terrible, but it's not a business. It's a lifestyle. It's part of life entertainment. And I think that's really been part of the legacy of the airline industry. It's got feet in both camps. It's kind of like it's a premium, leisure, discretionary brand. On the other hand, it is to some extent commodity and a very heavy a capital expense as well as people expense. So it's got a bit of everything, and it's vertically integrated. And that really comes, and this is much too big for this debate, but it really comes from all of those constraints that are put on it from regulators. So you can't merge airlines easily. You have to fly on bilaterals, so you're only as good as your alternate, the other airline that's flying on the route. Those things are breaking down, but they're breaking down glacially. I think if this were a more normal industry, and it was a business, there would be a lot more mergers, for example, much more rationalisation, and it would not be so chaotic. It is actually at the moment, and that's probably what's most broken about it. The other point that I would raise, I don't want to hog it, but the other point that I would say is that a lot of the processes for the airline industry were built in the 1970s even, 80s, and early 90s. A lot of the processes which everyone in travel will work with, they were built on mainframes. And although you've taken the mainframes, the airline away from the mainframes, you can't take the mainframe processes away from the airline industry. And a lot of the work that's being done at the moment, and I think it's speeding up, I would say, I think it is speeding up finally, is to try to get over those really cumbersome processes that still bog everything down. So I think those two things have to change to make the industry a proper industry.
I would say we do need to be a little bit careful because competition is good for the consumer. But that is definitely a great debate and probably a little bit outside the scope of here. Look, I don't think the industry is broken. I think there's a lot of things that need to improve. I 100% agree with a lot of it being based on systems that were from another time with a scale, a much smaller scale. The amount of people traveling now is not the same as it was in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. A personal pet peeve of mine is the slot regulation system in constrained airports. That has got to change. And we are massive advocates of changing it. Not completely changing the system, but making sure that the parts that are broken adapt to the current times. This is a great industry, and it's a privilege to work in, and we connect people, we connect communities, we allow businesses to thrive. Everything can get better, and yes, there are parts that do need to get fixed or can improve.
I've got half an eye on that clock ticking down, but I think I'd have a slightly more positive take than the industry is broken. Clearly, some of the things that Kevin listed, they're facts, they exist. But the industry works around it. It always has and will always continue to do so. Post-COVID, all airlines are in a much more efficient and effective place, and I think I see innovation right across the piece, whether it's some of the technology mainframes, distribution, these things are now moving. I'm sure in other industries maybe they would move faster, but I see lots of reasons to be positive. And just on Stephanie's point, the aviation industry opens up communities. We enable globalization. This is the world travel market. There's a lot of people out there who think that travel and tourism is really, really important, and that's why they're here, and that's why this show, and that's why we're sitting on this stage. And I think airlines are a major, major part of that, and we shouldn't forget that. Of course we need to continue to modernise, of course we need to continue to improve our sustainability, but actually at the heart of it, connecting communities, enabling businesses, opening up the world in a way that would not be possible without the proliferation of aviation. So reasons to be cheerful. I don't know who that person was who was less cheerful, but I'd happily have a beer with them and try and see the more positive side.
I'll join you.
I think my point was, Luke, the same as yours, is that we can do it. We can do it.
Right.
We've now got the tools to do it, and if there's the will to do it, let's not forget that as we go in towards the boom.
Sure.
Because that's what's happened before. We must get more efficient. We must go and do this. We must mend those things. We must, and then life gets busy, and it gets all the revenue comes back, and we forget it. Let's make sure this time we mend it.
For sure. Have we got time for another question? One more? One more. You're right in my eye line, so you win.
Sorry, in Steve's defense, you cannot see past the first three
Yeah.
The
rows.
lights are really bright.
Lady in the green jumper. Feels a bit like Bruce's prices, right?
Hello, Sasha here. It's a short and a little bit controversial question for you.
Love it.
Okay, here I go. Is the aviation industry ready to face the energy crisis? Thank you.
Very short.
I'll try and get very, very quickly and try and give a straight answer to a straight question. Yes, I think so. Lots of considerations about all sorts of factors, and I would point out in evidence the work that we're doing around sustainable aviation fuel as a catalyst to driving change. Other things have hit the aviation industry, and we always adapt and we always come through it. So my short answer would be yes.
We have to. We absolutely have to. And we've talked a lot about SAF, but SAF isn't the only option. You know, there will be hydrogen planes at some point. There are other technologies, so we're going to have to.
There will be. It's just whether they're there in time. I think that's the question. It's about the speed, not the will or the innovation. The industry has been hugely innovative, and the planes today bear no relation on aircraft that were even 20 years ago. They're absolutely a different class. But we haven't got that long, I think. That's why I have the urgency about it.
It takes time, right, to manufacture an airline engine. I think I've read 2 years just to create an engine. And, you know, if you want to do that at scale.
To develop an engine, to develop an aircraft and an engine, I mean, it took Airbus about 15 years to get to the A380 fully up in production, and only lasted 20 years. I mean, it is an enormous amount of money. And if there were enough electric aircraft today in the world to fulfill it, we're talking about $3 trillion, something like GDP of the UK, to replace all the aircraft that are there today with new ones, which would be great, but no one's going to pay for it. So I think we've got to get a little bit foot on the pedal, I think. Well, that's a bad analogy for sustainability. We've got to go faster.
Sure. Time for one more, or is that it? Last one, here we go. Yes, over there. Oh, that's a... barely see.
Hi. I can't stand up. There's a reason for that. I'm in a wheelchair. My question is directed at Luke and Stephanie. Luke, congratulations on all your aircrew and cabin staff. They're amazing. However, you could make a lot of changes on board your aircraft very cheaply for us to travel more often. We've got the purple pound. Do you know, we can't even travel first class. Your seats aren't accessible for us. Stephanie, Gatwick Airport is probably the airport I use the most often. My experience of trying to get through security is degrading. It's time consuming, and even on return can be very upsetting. What are you going to do about your disabled passengers? There's a lot of talk about you want to increase revenue. Why are you not increasing us as well?
Great question. I don't want to diminish it in any way. Let's spend some time afterwards after these great people have been on their way and I can go through it in a bit more detail. I believe I could point out a huge amount of investment and change to enable a much broader accessibility for a number of disabilities, and I like to think that Virgin Atlantic certainly are leading in that space, but that does not mean in any way, shape or form we are there, and everything is done, and we always want to continue to push ourselves forward. Please catch me afterwards. I think I can see from the light you've got quite distinctive hair colour, so I should be able to spot you afterwards. Please, I'd love to get your thoughts on that, thank you.
The only thing I'll add to that is really sorry. That's not what we want for our passengers. We have a very old infrastructure, and I agree with you. We know what the challenges are. The infrastructure in itself is not great from an accessibility point of view. There's a lot of stairs, there's a lot of up and downs. It's quite a tricky airport to manage sometimes. What I will say is we're aware of it. We've hired a team to do an audit of the airport. We have a specialized accessibility person at the airport now. She's new, she's fairly new, she's fantastic. She's implementing some really big changes, and we know that it's something that needs to get better. And when we say we're the airport for everyone, whatever their journey, we mean that, and if it's not at the moment, we will improve on it.
Sure, well I think that's a wrap. Thank you everybody for coming and listening to us today. Sorry about the music, out of our control. I've been told that there are drinks at the community hub after this. Something should come up on screen somewhere, so feel free to go get some, I'm guessing, free drinks from WTM. And lastly, thank you to the panelists. Thank you Kevin, thank you Stephanie, thank you Luke.